superstar Kawhi Leonard signed a $28 million endorsement deal with an environmental startup funded by Clippers owner Steve Ballmer, currently under federal investigation for fraud.
Sports fans are reeling after a shocking scandal ripped through the NBA, and at the center of it all stands Kawhi Leonard. Reports of a staggering $28 million fraud scheme have surfaced, sparking outrage and disbelief across the league. Now Stephen A. Smith, never one to mince words, has stepped forward to confront Kawhi directly, demanding answers and accountability. This fiery clash is sending shockwaves through basketball circles, raising urgent questions about trust, money, and the true cost of fame. But what really went down? The NBA is no stranger to drama, but this time it wasn't a buzzer beater or a playoff upset. It was something darker. A tangled web of money, power, and silence that left fans wondering if one of the league's most mysterious stars had once again managed to collect millions for doing almost nothing. Everything changed when investigative journalist Pablo Torre dropped his bombshell report. Whispers instantly turned into roars. At the center stood Kawhi Leonard, the famously quiet superstar of the Los Angeles Clippers. His silence has always been his shield, but now that very silence has become the loudest sound in basketball. According to Torre's findings, Leonard had quietly signed a secret $28 million endorsement deal with a company called Aspiration. On paper, Aspiration looked like the future of finance. A green banking startup promising to plant trees, help customers go carbon neutral, and make sustainability fashionable. But once the layers were peeled back, the dream revealed itself as fraud. Aspiration wasn't planting hope, it was burying lies. A financial scheme teetering on collapse. The shock wasn't just the company's downfall, but Kawhi Leonard's alleged role. A contract signed in April 2022 raised more eyebrows than any NBA box score. It demanded nothing from Leonard. No commercials, no speeches, not even a single public mention of the firm. Yet he stood to pocket every cent of the $28 million simply by remaining with the Clippers. No effort, no obligations, just money quietly flowing into his account. What made things murkier was the involvement of Clippers owner Steve Ballmer. The Microsoft billionaire, whose fortune swings between $50 and $200 billion, wasn't watching from a distance. Reports suggest Ballmer personally invested $50 million into Aspiration, while also brokering a $300 million partnership between the Clippers and the company. That overlap between owner, player, and sponsor raised an explosive question. Was this a coincidence, or a clever way of skirting the NBA's strict salary cap rules? The league couldn't afford to ignore it. Commissioner Adam Silver has repeatedly described salary cap circumvention as the NBA's cardinal sin. And once Pablo Torre's investigation surfaced, the league acted. A formal probe was launched, with powerhouse law firm Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen and Katz, the same team that handled the Donald Sterling and Robert Sarver scandals, brought in. That decision alone signaled how seriously the NBA viewed these allegations. Older NBA fans couldn't help but flash back to the 1990s when whispers of this Kawhi Leonard scandal first broke. Back then, the Minnesota Timberwolves had been caught hiding an under-the-table deal with Joe Smith. The punishment was brutal. The league stripped away 5 first-round draft picks and hit the franchise with millions in fines. At the time, it sent a chilling message. The NBA would come down hard on any attempt to cheat the salary cap. Now, history seemed to be repeating itself. Could the Los Angeles Clippers be facing something just as devastating, or even worse? Because if investigators concluded that Kawhi Leonard's secret $28 million endorsement deal with Aspiration was essentially a disguised payment, funneling money outside the bounds of his NBA contract, the league's response would be swift and merciless. Picks could be stripped. Fines could rain down. And, in the most extreme scenario, Leonard's contract itself could be voided. But while the legal implications are enormous, it's the personalities involved that make this scandal irresistible. Kawhi Leonard has always been an enigma. Fans know him as the quiet superstar. A player who rarely speaks, rarely shows emotion, and lets his game do all the talking. Yet his Clippers career has been defined just as much by his absence as by his dominance. Since signing with the franchise in 2019, Leonard has earned over $241 million, while missing nearly 44% of regular season games. He sat out entire years, like the 2021-22 campaign, while nursing injury. Add in the fact that he's missed 15 of 50 playoff games during his tenure, and critics argue that Kawhi has become the king of collecting maximum money for minimum work. Against that backdrop, a $28 million endorsement deal requiring zero effort sounded almost surreal. It fit the very caricature that his loudest detractors had painted for years. And then, looming in the background, was Steve Ballmer. The wealthiest owner in professional sports, Ballmer has long been known for his passion and his deep pockets. Worth anywhere from $50 billion to $200 billion depending on the market, Ballmer has the resources to outspend every other owner in the league. But that wealth now placed him directly in the crosshairs of this scandal. Reports revealed that Ballmer didn't just watch as aspiration worked with Leonard. He invested $50 million of his own fortune into the company. He also helped push through a staggering $300 million sponsorship deal between Aspiration and the Clippers. That overlap between owner, player, and sponsor sparked the most explosive question of all. Was this all just an unfortunate coincidence? Or was Ballmer deliberately structuring a loophole to funnel extra money to his star player while staying under the NBA's strict salary cap? The timing raised more questions than it answered. But Ballmer wasn't the only name adding intrigue. Enter Joe Sandberg, Aspiration's co-founder. Sandberg has already pleaded guilty to wire fraud, admitting he defrauded investors and lenders of more than $248 million. With the FBI, the SEC, and the Department of Justice circling, Aspiration's collapse wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. The only mystery was how many reputations would be dragged down in the wreckage. And then there's Dennis Robertson, better known to fans as Uncle Dennis. For years, Robertson has been Kawhi Leonard's most trusted advisor. But to NBA insiders, he has a reputation for eyebrow-raising demands. Back in 2019, during Kawhi's free agency sweepstakes, Robertson allegedly asked teams for private planes, guaranteed endorsement deals, and even ownership stakes in franchises. The Lakers famously balked, calling those requests flat-out illegal under NBA rules. Now, fans were left wondering, was the Aspiration deal simply the latest chapter in Robertson's long history of pushing the limits? The fanbase quickly fractured into two camps. Some argued that Leonard had done nothing wrong. After all, he signed a contract offered to him. It wasn't his responsibility to investigate whether the company making the offer was legitimate. If Aspiration wanted to throw money at him, why wouldn't he accept? Others saw it differently. To them, this was the final straw. A superstar already accused of missing too many games was now accused of quietly pocketing millions off the court without lifting a finger. The optics were devastating. To those critics, this wasn't just bad luck. It was the ultimate example of Leonard getting rich while doing less. Yet even amid the frenzy, one fact remained: no one had proven Kawhi Leonard himself did anything illegal. The fraud charges filed so far were aimed squarely at Aspiration's leadership. Leonard's name was tied to the deal, yes, but the allegations didn't directly accuse him of criminal activity. That left the league, and the public, with one haunting question: did Leonard knowingly benefit from a fraudulent setup, or was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? The NBA launched a formal investigation, led by powerhouse law firm Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen and Katz, the same legal team that handled the Donald Sterling and Robert Sarver scandals. That decision alone showed how seriously Commissioner Adam Silver viewed the allegations. Salary cap circumvention has long been described as the league's cardinal sin. If the Clippers were proven guilty, the consequences could reshape the franchise's future. And that's where the comparisons to Joe Smith come roaring back. The Timberwolves were gutted for their violation. Could the Clippers lose Leonard, their cornerstone star, if the league determined the deal crossed the line? While investigators dug, the media firestorm exploded. Stephen A. Smith, never one to hold back, turned the scandal into his personal crusade. On ESPN, he thundered, "The worst superstar I've ever seen." He wasn't just attacking the deal itself but what he saw as years of questionable commitment. To Stephen A., the Aspiration deal wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a larger pattern. Leonard's career had been defined by load management, long absences, and limited appearances. Now here he was, allegedly earning millions for an endorsement no one had even heard of. Millions for games missed, Stephen A. roared. Millions more for endorsements buried in the dark. To him, the story wasn't about corruption alone, it was about a superstar gaming the system while offering little in return. But Stephen A. wasn't the only voice fueling the fire. Pablo Torre, the journalist whose investigation had first exposed the deal, doubled down. His reporting wasn't based on whispers or gossip. It came from bankruptcy filings, insider testimonies, and hard financial documents. On The Rich Eisen Show, Torre explained why the arrangement was so bizarre. Normally, endorsement deals are public. A brand ambassador is supposed to be seen, their face on commercials, their name in marketing campaigns. This deal was the opposite. It was hidden, buried, invisible. Naturally, fans seized on every twist. Social media turned into a feeding frenzy of memes, hot takes, and conspiracy theories. Was Leonard a mastermind, knowingly playing the system? Or was he just a pawn in a scheme much bigger than himself? Torre's podcast investigation racked up millions of downloads almost overnight. People couldn't get enough of the scandal. Every new detail only fueled the obsession. Meanwhile, attention turned back to Steve Ballmer. His role, once viewed as distant, was now under intense scrutiny. Was he complicit? Careless? Or simply conned? Ballmer tried to defend himself, insisting he had no knowledge of Leonard's secret deal. He even claimed that he, too, had been scammed by Aspiration's founders. But critics weren't buying it. How could a man as shrewd and business-savvy as Ballmer, worth billions, stumble blindly into such a sloppy setup? Mark Cuban, always outspoken, came to Ballmer's defense. Even the smartest minds, Cuban argued, can be fooled by sophisticated scammers. To him, the $300 million partnership with Aspiration in 2021 was just another sponsorship, not corruption. Leonard's personal deal, Cuban suggested, might have slipped under the radar. But skeptics remained unconvinced. Bill Simmons, for one, pointed to Ballmer's obsessive planning of the Clippers' new Intuit Dome. Every detail accounted for, every dollar tracked. For a man like that, Simmons argued, ignorance wasn't plausible. This didn't feel like a blunder. It felt intentional. And Torre kept pressing. His sources suggested that Leonard's deal wasn't a random accident at all. According to former Aspiration employees, the arrangement had been deliberately structured to sidestep the NBA's salary cap rules. If true, this wasn't just a financial scandal. It was a direct assault on the integrity of the league. And that's the NBA's nightmare. If the Clippers had done it, what would stop other franchises from following suit? Analysts circled back to Joe Smith again, warning that if the league confirmed these suspicions, the punishments could be even harsher this time around. The league's reputation was on the line. And so was Kawhi Leonard's. Would the NBA dare strip the Clippers of their superstar if wrongdoing was proven? Could Leonard's carefully cultivated reputation, the quiet, unbothered, stoic superstar, survive the blow? Or would this scandal fade away like so many before it, leaving behind more questions than answers? One thing was certain, the $28 million mystery had already become one of the most talked about sagas in modern NBA history. A superstar who built his entire career on silence now found himself trapped in a scandal where silence might no longer be enough. And fans everywhere are left waiting, wondering, what shocking truth really hides behind Kawhi Leonard's $28 million controversy? Outside the United States, the scandal didn't just stay in NBA circles. International media latched onto the story, amplifying it across Europe and Asia. Headlines painted the controversy as a clear example of how money and power bend the rules in American sports. Commentators abroad framed the ordeal as proof that the NBA's financial system isn't as airtight as it claims to be. The speed with which it went global showed just how deeply the league's brand, and its scandals, resonate far beyond US borders. For Kawhi Leonard, the fallout couldn't have come at a worse time. His reputation was already fragile in certain circles. His messy departure from the San Antonio Spurs had left lingering bitterness. His free agency demands in 2019 were labeled excessive. and his frequent absences due to load management had fueled endless debates about his commitment to the game. This new scandal, whether Kawhi was an active participant or just swept up in the storm, only fueled the perception that he prioritized personal gain over team loyalty. The reaction across the basketball world revealed something deeper: division. Some figures rushed to defend Leonard and Clippers owner Steve Ballmer, casting them as victims of a slick financial scam. Others leaned into the chaos, framing the ordeal as evidence of corruption embedded in the league itself. In many ways, the scandal became less about hard facts and more about perspective, the version of the story people wanted to believe. At its core, this was never just a basketball story. It was a tale of money, power, and perception colliding on one of the sport's biggest stages. It forced fans to ask uncomfortable questions. How much do we really know about what happens behind the curtain? How far are teams and players willing to go to secure a financial advantage? And most importantly, how fragile is the idea of fair play when billions of dollars are on the line? Stephen A. Smith may have shouted the loudest, but his frustration reflected the feelings of many fans. People want transparency. They want fairness. They want effort. And whether Leonard was guilty of scheming or simply guilty of silence, the optics of a $28 million hidden deal were impossible to ignore. So where does the NBA go from here? Will the league crack down on the Clippers with punishments that echo through history? Or will this fade away, chalked up as just another messy chapter in the unpredictable saga of professional basketball? For now, the scandal hangs like a storm cloud over Leonard's legacy, a reminder that in the NBA, the drama off the court can be just as explosive as anything that happens on it. But what secrets will the investigation reveal, especially after Stephen A. Smith personally confronted Kawhi Leonard? The NBA has always been a magnet for drama. From referee betting scandals to disgraced owners, the league has survived storm after storm. But the mess swirling around Kawhi Leonard and the alleged $28 million fraud scheme feels different. This isn't about poor judgment or bad behavior. It cuts deeper, striking at the very heart of the league's credibility. And at the center of it all? A silent superstar who refuses to speak, and a furious Stephen A. Smith demanding answers. Picture this. Late summer in Los Angeles. A quiet workout, away from cameras. Kawhi Leonard is locked in, working methodically on his mid-range jumper, robotic and mechanical as always. Suddenly, Stephen A. Smith storms in, fire in his eyes. Eyewitnesses claim he walked straight up to Kawhi, wasting no time on pleasantries. "You took money you weren't supposed to take. You know that, right?" The words sliced through the air. Kawhi silent. Not a blink. Not a word. Just that unreadable stare he's known for. Stephen A. pressed harder. Did Kawhi know the money was fraudulent? Was he aware that funds had been funneled improperly from Ballmer through aspiration? Again, silence. And in that moment, the very quality that once made Kawhi seem cool and untouchable, his refusal to engage, suddenly looked different. His silence didn't feel stoic. It felt guilty. Because in the middle of a financial scandal this massive, silence doesn't signal calm. It suggests complicity. Kawhi's refusal to explain himself only poured gasoline on the fire. And that's dangerous when $28 million is in question. By September 6th, the NBA had already confirmed it had retained powerhouse law firm Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen and Katz, the same group that handled the Donald Sterling investigation in 2014 and Robert Sarver's downfall in 2022. Both probes ended in career-altering penalties. Now, they were digging into the Clippers' ties with aspiration. And whispers were already circulating about severe consequences. Could Kawhi's $153 million contract extension actually be voided if investigators proved he knowingly accepted fraudulent money? Imagine that, the face of the Clippers stripped of both contract and reputation in one devastating blow. For years, Kawhi carefully cultivated a unique brand, the quiet superstar. No flashy endorsements. No endless sound bites. No glamorous lifestyle. Fans loved him because he seemed pure, detached from drama. A man who famously drove the same old car for years and just kept his head down. But now, that very image had crumbled. Instead of the humble star who didn't care about money, people began to wonder if he'd been cashing dirty checks behind the curtain. And the irony was impossible to miss. Kawhi spent his entire career avoiding the spotlight. Now the spotlight was hunting him, hotter and harsher than ever. Meanwhile, Stephen A. Smith stepped into a role few expected: watchdog, whistleblower, the conscience of the NBA. Known for his booming voice and unrelenting commentary, Stephen A. had spent decades holding players and owners accountable on TV. But this was different. This wasn't just for ratings. This was personal. For 2 decades, he dissected every contract, every trade, every controversy. He'd criticized stars and defended others. But he'd never been accused of corruption himself. Fraud, in his mind, was the line you could never cross. It was where the NBA's honor collapsed. And that's why he couldn't stay silent now. Think about what's at stake. If Kawhi really benefited from funneled money, what would stop other billionaire owners from pulling the same trick? What's to stop teams from secretly funneling players extra millions through startups, shell companies, or side businesses? If that loophole exists, the entire salary cap system, the backbone of competitive balance, becomes meaningless. And if fans stop believing in fair play, the NBA risks becoming pro wrestling. Scripted, rigged, fake. That's why Adam Silver is under immense pressure. If this investigation confirms wrongdoing, the league must make an example out of Kawhi and the Clippers, just as it did with Sterling and Sarver. Anything less risks shattering trust forever. And what about Kawhi's legacy? If he's cleared, maybe this scandal becomes a footnote, an embarrassing detour in an otherwise stellar career. But if evidence surfaces that he, or Uncle Dennis, knew what was happening, the fallout will be catastrophic. Fines, suspensions, a torn-up contract, and perhaps most devastating, the permanent stain on his reputation. For a man who built his myth on being untouchable and above the noise, there's nothing worse than being remembered as the face of the NBA's dirtiest financial scandal. That's why Stephen A.'s confrontation might go down as the defining moment of the saga. A commentator, not a player, staring down a superstar and demanding the truth. It wasn't just about Kawhi Leonard. It was about the NBA itself. Integrity. Fairness. The very idea of competition. The scandal is far from over. Lawsuits continue. Investigations dig deeper. And Adam Silver's next move could reshape the league for years to come. But one thing is already clear. This is no longer just Kawhi Leonard's problem. It's the NBA's credibility on trial. And history may remember that confrontation more than the fraud itself, the day Stephen A. Smith stared into Kawhi Leonard's silence and asked the question every fan wanted answered. Because in the end, this isn't just a story about money. It's about trust. And once trust is gone, no superstar silence can ever bring it back. So, what do you think really happened when Stephen A. Smith confronted Kawhi Leonard over that $28 million fraud scheme? We'd love to hear your thoughts.